You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Welcome everybody to our first special guest conversation for season 4 on episode 139 of Inspire Change with Gunter. In the last 2 episodes, we started our series on the enigma of Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson. We received a higher than normal surge of listeners and comments from our listeners wanting more. So we put together this very special episode to continue the conversation in a longer show format with some very special guests in studio joining Gunter to discuss Jordan Peterson, masculinity, and the stories we tell ourselves. I am Miranda Spigener-Sapon, executive producer of Inspire Change and moderator for this episode. For those of us joining the show as listeners for the first time, when we have guests, it is not a host to guest Q&A style, but a casual, thought-provoking discussion that encourages, empowers critical thinking, and inspires our guests to speak freely, openly as a great conversation without judgment, and allowing for an intelligent and moving conversation on topics involving not just current events, relationships, gender, but also what is affecting men and masculinity today. Our guests range from other psychologists, authors, thought leaders, speakers, filmmakers, and everyday people. So let's welcome this panel for the episode. First, we have Dr. Mark Williams joining us for a second time in the studio as guest on Inspire Change. And we are happy to have you join us again for this conversation. Dr. Mark Williams is an internationally recognized professor of cognitive neuroscience who has worked at top universities in Australia and overseas, including MIT in the US. He has been published in top-tier international and academic journals and been widely featured in the media, including the ABC, Sky News, SBS, The Guardian, New York Times, The Economist, and New Scientist. Mark has studied how we learn and develop using cutting-edge computational brain imaging analysis and the adoption of new technologies like virtual reality and transcranial magnetic stimulation. He designed and convened a very special first-year neuroscience course at university with more than 800 students and works with schools internationally and improving teaching methods, learning outcomes, and student well-being. Our next guest are 3 young men I have recently had the honor to work with in the entertainment industry here in LA. Grayson Arndt, my executive assistant here at Nortainment, as well as an inspiring writer and filmmaker. And recently, many of you have heard his voice as the new announcer for the 4th season of Inspire Change. Grayson is a recent graduate from the University of Colorado. With a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and I'll quote him here as stories are amazing things, whether they are told by an Oscar-winning writer on the screen or a father at the end of a bed. Stories tell us who we are, where we come from, and where we're going. They inform ourselves, our values, draw on our emotions, and cultivate the foundations of thriving communities, big or small. Next up is Rish Thakkar, a documentary filmmaker. Rish has led documentary projects in India, France, and the US. A graduate of Chapman University with an MFA in documentary filmmaking, he believes audiences all around the world connect through one thing: emotions. Driven by his passion for inducing emotions and audience through the audiovisual medium and guided by quality direction, he tends to put his best foot forward in every project, irrespective of however a small role he may play in it. And last is Nate Munoz, who also happens to be our sound audio engineer in studio, as well as part of our sound design and editing team of my animated series in production, Hazley. Nate has had his boots on the ground in the music industry ever since he captured his interest at 11 years old. Music has been a part of Nate's life for generations. He currently runs his original music at live shows all over LA, and he works in PR and music management. So now, without further ado, let's get this conversation started, and I'll hand it off to our host of Inspire Change, Gunter Swoboda.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, guys, for being on board here. Let me stress one thing, as Miranda said, it's not a Q&A necessarily, but a meaningful conversation. So I'm pretty chuffed actually to see guys here who are a lot younger, because you guys are going to carry a legacy. You know, Mark and I, probably more me than Mark, we've got years left in us, but we've got to think about handing on, in a way, a better story. You know, what is it that we are going to generate to, you know, I'm very Aristotelian in this, and that is that, you know, ultimately, you know, learning, governance, and so on is to leave a better society than what we got. So the question is, how are we going to do that when there are such polarized ideas currently going through our culture? I mean, you know, it is just really interesting in that regard that in my lifetime, I've seen a shift from a much more consensus-oriented way of being together in culture to this, like, us versus them. You know, it's like the stuff that happened in the counterculture revolution in the 60s, not that was all good. You know, getting stoned every day is not necessarily the best way to create long-term change, right? It may have had its place. You know, Timothy Leary and his work with LSD and so on is now coming back in the sense of microdosing and how it impacts on managing mental health. So again, we have a tendency to chuck the baby out with the bathwater. And one of my interests has really been, like Grayson says, the stories we tell ourselves. Because I started working with Vietnam veterans in the early 80s. And the issue about masculinity was front and center in that. And for many years, you know, I was trying to deal not so much with the physical injuries that these guys had, but both the mental and moral injury that they represented with. Okay, so that to me became a seminal point. So what I want to do in today's session, as I said, is have this meaningful conversation about influences like Jordan Peterson, and there's many more. I'm just, in a way, I'm picking on him for critical analysis because he holds himself up as this super academic, this super brain who puts up some pretty stupid ideas in my book. And I, you know, like, not only that, but most recently, he in fact came out publicly to body shame somebody. Now, I might be able to wear that a little bit if we're talking about, you know, someone who's really ill-educated, a laborer, you know, who comes from a very, diminished socioeconomic background. But someone like Jordan Peterson, who purports to be a clinical psychologist, who's into helping people, who presents himself as a self-help, you know, master, I was shocked, to be honest. I was really stunned that he would make a comment like that. I mean, it's not just ethically and morally wrong, but it's also wrong in so many different ways. Now, part of the thing is I'm really pleased to see, as I said, young guys, because I want to hear from you guys about what being exposed to someone like Jordan Peterson, because he's been out there for years, you know, with this massive social profile. You know, what sort of influence that's represented to you? I mean,
right. Yeah, I mean, I think a person like Jordan Peterson occupies so many different facets of our everyday life as an actor in culture and in supposedly the scientific world and in ultimately the political world. Someone who has obtained this level of fame and success based on his word really changes, or has the ability to change people's minds in a way that us as everyday individuals don't.
Yeah. And so go on, Rish.
No. Sorry. I was just saying what I think is how he got famous was that news media wanted entertainment. And when you have a debate where one person is on an extreme and the other person is on this extreme, there's always a fight, and fights are always interesting. And because he has such a way to break down things to their basic, put people if they are black or white, he gets a lot of following because it's easier to understand what his perspective is, and it gives people relief that they understand a complex problem with such simple words. But those problems are really complex, and he puts things that are on surface, and he doesn't go anytime deep, because anything that he says is mostly in 3 to 4 words, 3 to 4 like sentences. And I think that's why he's famous, because it's easier to understand him. And I think even he understands that he's not doing any service. He understands that what he's blabbering is all bullshit, and still he goes out there because he earns money, he gets attention by doing that. That's what I feel.
It's American thing though too. I think America has a tendency to put a lot of revere on just figures, quote unquote figures, as we call them. Like I've talked to people from Russia, Latin America, and they're like, there's a whole lot of like getting, if a person goes extreme, they get on film, they get 50 million views, everyone's gonna assume that he's doing something right or something entirely wrong, but it tends to be on the other side. Why? Because America's media is so different than others. Like we just like to hyper glamorize for clout. That's the word we use. Honestly, it's a lot of it's weird. I watch Jordan Peterson. I'm not a follower of that. I'm not too much engaged with, the whole philosophical talk. I like talking about it and understanding more than anything. If anything, I'm a more mouth shut, ears open, take it in and see how I can process it. But in the case with Jordan Peterson, it's very dangerous because relating it to like the masculinity complex, men, how we, attribute to our emotions and how we react, what we go through when we're on the bottom out, or, how women view us in this today's society, all that. I think it's very dangerous to have Jordan as that sort of guy, like, to have that massive following, because it's not necessarily whether it's right or wrong, or whether he's clearing out his message in an appropriate way where others, like yourselves, Gunter, like yourselves, Mark, where they can mutually agree on. Because just judging from this, it seems like Gunter and Mark really don't have that sort of likeness towards, not even likeness, but agreement with Jordan's sayings. Like it's just right off the bat. And I feel like that's a major red flag for sure. And I think for men, we need someone or somebody or a group that can kind of positively show us like, we're good guys, men are cool. Like we've done some bad stuff, I'm not gonna lie, but I feel like we've got this, like my generation, and I think the people before that too, like 16-year-olds, the 8th graders that are out there protesting the Roe versus Wade sort of deal. I think they've got, that's like pretty cool to see them mutually agreeing, because there's just so much controversy with Jordan, and I just really want someone that's really good on the men's side sort of team. And going extreme and getting popular off that, it's dangerous. And I think it's an American thing though. I think we're just so garnered, like we have our Kim Kardashians and they're hyper glamorized. Are they the best role models for my daughter? If I have one, I probably wouldn't want them to watch Kim Kardashian all day. Like, I just personally me, man. And I think that's just America's problem. Just, we like to put people on screens, hyper expose them. And we don't tend to find too much of the effect, or actually bother to even look at that towards men, towards people my age. Because, I mean, my mind is still malleable. I'm 23. People who are 5 or 8 years older, 10 times is more malleable. And I think words have a lot of power, especially with minds that are supremely malleable. And I think as we get older, we tend to convince ourselves that that's the right way, when actually it probably wasn't. And I really want that clarity going through more on. I feel like Jordan's just like, yeah, this is what's on my mind. I've done some proper things, and apparently I have a huge following. I must be doing something right. So let's just continue the rodeo. And it shouldn't be a circus. It should be, we're all in this for together to get better. And like you said, Gunter, he's here to try to help people, but it seems it's more he's like hyper gloated on himself, and that his ideology is like, no, this is what, like, trust me guys. Like I feel like that's the vibe I'm getting. And I feel we should have a different person, especially in that sense. I mean, he's got 50 million views on his GQ 3 years ago. I mean, oh my God. I'm sure there's many other people out there that are rooting for the men's side, and especially what he's talking about, not just even men, or just gender, just clear thought, clarity, and helpfulness. That
it's celebrities, Gunter, that you talked about. I don't really want to necessarily name the different ones, but just to kind of what he was expounding. So many
that celebrity cult status.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on with Jordan. I think that's the American thing. Honestly, I think that's what it is.
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's frustrating as someone who's a scientist, because he wasn't famous as a scientist. I can't find anything where he's actually published something which was, made a significant contribution to science. And so he's only a celebrity. He's only really famous for making controversial comments on media programs. I think it was Canada was changing some of its rulings in Parliament, and that's how he became famous, because he made controversial comments about that. And and it's gone on to this. Yeah, and that's the only thing. I mean, that's why he became famous, is because he's willing to make controversial comments and therefore be famous for controversial comments, rather than because he's actually a good scientist and he's actually got a good founding in something that he's actually done, and therefore become famous for that, which I think is really sad. And I think it's a really sad indictment of society at the moment that we do hold these people up when they're only really just about being controversial and not actually about helping society or, moving our society forward, which is what we should be talking about. And that's pretty sad. And as you said, there's several media personalities out there that are about that, probably a lot of media personalities that are just about that, just being confrontational, just bringing up things that are awfully, And if you just look at why we're here, I mean, this started because we're talking about a 60-odd-ish man making a sexual reference about a 20-year-old. I mean, that's absolutely deplorable that he actually did that. And there's only two reasons I can think that somebody at that age would do that. And it's either A, he wants to get noticed, which is sort of like a toddler wanting to get noticed by upsetting somebody. Or secondly, he thinks this woman is actually going to be attracted to him, and he needs to inform her that he's not attracted to her so that she doesn't make a fool of herself. I mean, either of those reasons is pretty deplorable, right? That this 60-year-old thinks that it's appropriate for him to comment on the attractiveness of a 20-year-old. It's just insane society that we live in, where that's seen as okay, and that person is seen as somebody that we actually want to listen to. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think he received a kind of proper cultural lashback from that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you had a good point, Mark, too. He got famous from the one video that he had a debate with. Like, if that's someone that's the reason why people listen to us straight from that video source, there's probably a problem with that. And that's my generation's fault too. Like, a lot of people follow someone because they did something crazy extreme on TikTok, Instagram, maybe even Facebook or Twitter. I could tweet out something, 1 million people could like it, and then finally I've got this power. That's pretty much, I feel like that's what's going on with Jordan too. It's just like, I figure he gets famous from this. Not too many people knew his backstory. I mean, I was like 15 or 16 when I saw this video, and I just thought he was just some dude that knew some stuff and owned a social justice where I laughed, and I didn't even think nothing of it. Fast forward 5-6 years, this man's everywhere. He's got a bestseller book, 50 million views plus on one video, and he's got a whole following now. And I'm like, geez, I think that's just, the end of the day, it's just American tradition. I feel like it's just American. I don't know if it's anywhere else, but I feel like this happens more in America, that we just give someone that power due to something like that. It's like a YouTube prankster. He gets famous because he does a really cool prank, and then everyone assumes he's a good prankster, and then he keeps doing it, and then he gets his following, and it's just off the rails from there. I think that's what was going on, but honestly, if you're famous from that one point of view, other than the other contributions to society, like you said, Mark, like, you can't really find anything scientifically where this man has made contributions to make society, men, women, and children better and their healthy lifestyles, all for it. But if it's not, big red flag. I mean, that's just me coming from the outside in. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting because, yes, he has got a bestseller. Have any of you guys read the 12 Rules? Antidote to Chaos?
No, I have not.
Mm-mm.
Okay, I've gone through both. And it's really interesting because the chapter headings are sort of like common sense, little similes where you go, oh, yeah, that sort of makes sense. And then when you start reading the chapter and you start actually putting some critical thought into it, you go, oh, hang on a minute, this is actually quite dodgy. Like the one that really, really got me up was the chapter on kids, on how to parent kids.
Oh.
So fundamentally, don't let your kids do anything that's going to embarrass you. Well, any teenager worth his salt is going to do shit that's going to embarrass the parent.
Oh yeah.
Right now, what happens when you stifle that, when you dominate and control that child through fear? You're going to get some fairly major psychopathology emerging out of that, right? Because you're not going to just start that when that kid's a teenager. You're going to be starting that stuff when the kid's a 3-year-old and chucking a tantrum. And it's interesting because his lack of insight is staggering when he describes how he was trying to dominate and control his, I think, 2-year-old at the time when he was trying to feed him. Like, you know, for someone who is a clinical psychologist to sort of not just take a step back and go, why am I trying to dominate and control a toddler, right? That says more about me than it does about the toddler, all right? But then, you know, the other extraordinarily scary part in this is how he positions his analysis of men in relationship to women, right? So he describes fundamentally that men are order and women are chaos. Well, both philosophically and psychologically, that stuff don't hold true, because if anyone's got structure and order in their life, it's a female. If I go biologically, it's because they've got a menstrual cycle that happens once a month. Right? Now, that actually helps you to order your life to a certain degree. Then when you get pregnant, as men, we don't have any of that. And in fact, when we look at impulsive behavior in men, we're much more likely to do that than women.
Gunter, you talk about one of your speeches, like in the TEDx and even in the documentary that we did, where the women's, when you talk about men and how not so much, but how women have been on top of the women's movement and rights and marches, and there's not too many men speakers out there. Like I said, you've got the Jordan Petersons, and it's what it's like. It's like pushing things through.
We need more Gunters.
But yeah, I mean, with what you and Mark are doing, and when I look at it, when I looked at Jordan Peterson's website, and Gunter, you might want to have some comments. And I'm looking at this also from being, even from a publicist point of view, not just a producer. I look at this and I go, his whole bio. I mean, I get bored in this day and age of short attention spans. I was constantly, I hate cutting down your bio when I'm putting it on gunterswoboda.com or Making Good Men Great, but I even look at your bio and your website, Mark, and I'm going, that's how a psychologist who's being influential should have it done. It starts with Jordan Peterson has 100 and something thousand million viewers on Twitter. It's like clout chase. This celebrity's following me, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, okay. I was in a Clubhouse discussion with a group of friends of mine, and we were sitting there talking about somebody else that's clout chasing all the time. And you see a lot of that in California, just in this industry. But I'm going, no one who's really, unless they've got some deep psychological issues, they don't clout chase. The most richest people in the world, you'd be amazed at how humble they are sometimes. And I'm like, this guy's not humble. His bio reads like he's trying to impress you. I mean, a bio it should be impressive, but naturally, organically. So I'll let you kind of hand that back to you. But I wanted to bring that point up and also from how it looks from a public standpoint, and also from a female's point of view, that doesn't look good. I don't see why he's so, yeah.
Well, again, why is this man so influential? Part of it is because, and I said this in one of the previous podcasts, is he learned to be a very, very good debater. But he does it in a way which, it's really putting into place a way of showing the other person up for being inferior. Like I've watched his debates with women who essentially, label themselves as feminists. And the only thing that I could come away with from there was that this man does not really fundamentally like women. And Gabor Mate says that as well, is that he sees Jordan Peterson as a very angry, hostile man who has very deep-seated unresolved issues. And as a psychologist, and I'm not diagnosing him, I'm just making a proposition, is that I see that in Jordan Peterson. Now, when men in particular have those sorts of deep unresolved issues, we frequently overlay them with narcissism. Okay, that becomes our defense mechanism. We become narcissistic, right? And so part of being narcissistic means being highly competitive, being dominating, being controlling, and by often using fear and intimidation to put the other person on the back foot rather than having an open conversation. And he does that very succinctly by being very shifty in his use of definitions. I mean, it doesn't matter whether we talk about, postmodernism. He represents postmodernism as this really simple idea when it's actually a highly complex school of thought that has very, very differing points of view as facets of that school of thinking. It's the same with Marxism, the same with feminism. He comes up with these, and Rish sort of said, he comes up with these bite-sized definitions that he uses, and you go, but hang on a minute, that's not the definition that I've got. And he's done that with religion as well. I mean, his definition of what it is to be a Christian, I had a Jesuit scripture teacher when I was at school as a kid. That Jesuit would not agree with him in one iota. He would just go, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but it's not Christianity. Right? Because Christianity has a particular theology and structure around its belief system that is not how he describes it. And then he makes statements, and again, we keep coming back to these outrageous statements about, everyone's a Christian. Atheists are all murderers. There is no morality without religion. The first book is the Bible. I mean, even he contradicts himself in those sorts of instances. I mean, there's a very good historical argument to say that, especially the book of Genesis and so on, is an extrapolation of many of the different thoughts, religious thoughts that were going on in the Middle East. It's an evolution. I mean, there's a school of thought that says, monotheism came essentially from Akhenaten, who went and worshipped the sun god, and then that got taken through. So the point that I'm making with that is it's very difficult to debate him when his frameworks are on a sort of intellectual quicksand. You sort of can't grab hold of him and go, hang on, this is where I'll pin you down, because he'll then, in the debate, change his definition to suit.
Yeah, I think the thing is that what he puts forward, he puts that you have to prove me wrong rather than he proving the other person wrong. He starts that he is the one who spoke the truth, and now it's on the other person to prove him wrong. But because his statements are so basic, it's really hard to put him wrong, because it's like, okay, that's true, but maybe for few people, that's not true for the whole population. That's the issue with how he puts, and that's how he's a good debater, because he puts the other person on pedestal to prove himself right rather than proving him wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was having before I came here, I was having a conversation with my roommate, because I was trying to just gather kind of what's my view of Jordan Peterson. And my roommate basically just said to me, he was like, listen, this is just a guy who has credentialed himself in certain fields and makes objective statements about things that are anything but, right? So he makes some statement that sounds like it's a fact, that it's a hard truth about the world, and that this is the way that we all experience the world. But he's making those statements on topics which don't which don't have hard truths in that kind of way, that aren't measurable.
Yeah, I think that's actually
true.
quite a good point of view.
Perfect.
Let me just change tack a little bit, because I worked with boys from the age of 13 to older men. Like my oldest client was about 83 recently. So I've got a very broad base from which to draw from. Now, you know, Nath, you're talking about this particular phenomenon is very American. Well, I can tell you that between the 15 to 35-year-olds that I've worked with, Jordan Peterson's had a significant impact here in Australia, right? And you might argue that my demographic is, you know, like not a representative sample. They're clients that come to me, and I'll go, yeah, but in a way, they're also selective, because most of them have checked me out on the internet, you know, usually through Google. And so they know where I'm coming from. You know, they know when I talk about making good men great, it's about deconstructing patriarchy. It's about getting a meaningful conversation together about what really solid, healthy masculinity is about, and creating networks amongst men that will create social influence. They're the three aims of making good men great, right? So they know what they're coming in for, right? And a lot of them will often try to engage me in a sort of combative dialogue. It's really interesting, because I'm there as a therapist, and I often have to get them to, I've developed a real, I think, without blowing my trumpet, a real skill in getting these guys who I see as being needed to be debriefed from a cult to begin to understand the broader picture and the nuances within the social story that we're being told. And this is where Mark and I come in when we talk about the great mankind. Men worked very hard for about 12,000 years to make sure we're on top of shit, to the disadvantage of women and then of other groups. And it happened to be a very Western imperialist phenomena, right? Now, I'm sure other cultures probably did some of that as well, but we somehow managed to, you know, master this little number, right? So, you know, issues about, you know, being territorial, being hierarchical. You know, Jordan Peterson talks about, you know, the hierarchy, right? As if it was a natural thing. It's about like the neoliberals talking about free market being a natural thing. It's the story that we tell ourselves. You know, Grayson's chuckling. You know, but we got conned. We got conned into something that's become socially not just dangerous but destructive. You know, so the extension of that is things like the NRA talking about the Second Amendment, that it represents individual rights to own guns, when it was actually the Second Amendment was about a well-organized militia in each state that allowed people within that militia to be armed in case. All right. So, you know, and this was recognized by, you know, the Supreme Court right up until, you know, 91. And in 2008, Anthony Scalia just changed the ballpark by challenging the New York restricted gun laws, and he won. And then suddenly there was this massive surge of a new attitude towards freedom and the right to bear arms. But you know, and I bet that if you went to Texas and you asked anybody, or in Michigan or Mississippi, about the history of this, they couldn't tell you. They wouldn't be able to tell you. And it's the same with patriarchy. We created a story over millennia that has convinced generation after generation of men that we're superior, right? And Mark and I have been writing about how that's influenced science. You know, I mean, even Albert Einstein's wife was never given credit for the maths that she did in his work, which is absolutely appalling. But he gave her a sheet of about 20 rules about what she needed to do as a good wife. I mean, the dude's got balls.
Yeah.
Right? I would have smacked him in the head for that.
Yeah.
I'm not going down that line. I'm not promoting violence. But, you know, I would have put him in his place. So here's the question I want to ask the young men, and Mark and I are going to want to be listening here, because I'm really interested in how the three of you have avoided getting hitched into the cult of someone like Peterson.
Life examples, man. I think every time I see Jordan, I think of my stepdad. And I think, and you know, there's always the saying here. It's like, you know, get beat like a stepchild, or your stepdads would tend to be, you know, assholes. You know, excuse my French, but you know,
Yeah.
I see it as kind of like that. You know, I always relate it. What does this person really mimic in my life? That's how I kind of go about seeing new faces, new speakers, people I keep close and away. And Jordan resembles a lot of like, stepdad came into my life at 6, you know, in and out with my bio dad, the whole spiel, typical divorce child. And I think when I hear Jordan, I always hear how my stepdad used to try to change and rewire our minds, give us these like quotes and sort of like almost commandments on how to be a man. Like, you know, my stepdad told me I was a beautiful burden. You know, that's pretty bad to tell a kid early on, because I didn't want to feel like a burden to him. I'm sure it was trying to evoke something nice out there, but he was a man that shunned his emotion for years. So I did too. And Jordan's like, every time I hear Jordan talk, I hear my stepdad talk. And it's the sort of thing, my stepdad did the whole thing. He went and got a proper education in America. He got his master's. He talked like he was like a philosopher, but he's not. He's a stepdad, you know. He's just a major in economics. He works for the city, and that's great. And I think that's like how I related to Jordan. It's like he's the guy that has some credentials, sat down, sounds pretty good when he debates to just a new face, probably younger people who are more malleable to that thought. And I related to that with my stepdad, and every time he would talk, it would just go off in my ear. And some of it had to be forced back into my brain, or else it would be a horrible night, sort of deal. And I think that's like the thing, like putting standards. This is what's right. Do this. This is what men are supposed to be. This is how it is, because I did this, and I actually talk pretty good, and I debate well. And I think that's kind of BS. I feel there's more to that for the validity of that. And that's how I do it. Like I related that to, and obviously I don't talk to stepdad anymore, but I feel like that's how I relate it in that sense. Like I just see his face the whole time. Like there's no good business here. That's how I kind of avoid it. I try to replicate it through people that have, you know, affected me in life. Yeah. Oh, my bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
And that's a really
so
good.
You've got. Go on, Mark.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's a really good point that you bring up there, which is that Jordan Peterson is really, really good at picking his market, right? He knows his demographic, the people he wants to convince, and that's what he plays on. He plays on this idea that 1950s were this golden age, and we all want to go back there, or these people want to go back there, and that's what he really focuses on. You know, the men are the rulers of their house, and they have control of their kids, and they have the best jobs, and all of that nonsense, right? And so, you know, like you were saying, it reminds you of your stepdad, and I think he's really good at doing that. Which is just knowing his market and just hitting that constantly, which is this nonsense about the 1950s being this golden age that we all want to go back to, when most of us wouldn't want to go back there. And I'm quite sure all those women that now are able to vote don't want to go back there. But yeah, that's a great point.
Wait, I like that.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Gunter. But
no, I was about the only observation I want to make at this point was that somehow you developed an inner framework that, in a sense, almost inoculated you against what someone like Jordan Peterson represents. Yeah. So there's something that didn't sit right. Your stepdad happened to represent that. Grayson, I'm really interested. I'm very curious, because I mean, what is it that's, in a sense, inoculated you to the influence of someone like Jordan Peterson as a young man? I mean,
right. You know, I think, okay, as far as the term inoculated goes, right? I think I'm still susceptible to the kind of information which Jordan Peterson puts out, whether or not I like kind of reflect well with Jordan Peterson might be besides the point. But I think the way that Jordan Peterson delivers information, I think, is I'm still somewhat susceptible to, right? The reason that I haven't been drawn to Jordan Peterson and his system of beliefs and his system of beliefs is, I think, mostly due to one, just I had a very loving family who encouraged my emotional development and has, stood by me and has had these ideas of masculinity in their minds for a very long time, and who have tried to teach me as best they could. And then also, I was very fortunate to have a very emotionally involved education. My first through fourth grade was this small program inside of my public elementary school that was a project-based learning program, and was just very involved in kind of conflict resolution and student leadership and emotional development. And just that really gave me this framework, especially as I went through the rest of school, right, to compare the rest of my schooling to. And so now I was in a more standard education system through middle school and high school and college. And I always had those comparisons to look back to, right, in those really foundational years for myself. And so I really do think it's these things that we learn at an early age, which allow us to think critically about the new things that we learn going on. Those early experiences allow us to have something to compare experiences to later on in life.
Yeah, thanks for that, Grayson. There's a couple of things that you said I might just pick up on before I'm going to call on Mark and some of his observation. What is it that Jordan Peterson talks about that still makes you sort of resonate with the message? Let's not talk about the man, the message.
So yeah, not even the message is what. So I'm saying I don't resonate with Jordan Peterson's message, right? What I think I'm susceptible to is people who deliver information in the same way but have different messages.
Right. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, because I was really curious about, because here's the thing, there are elements of what Jordan Peterson says and puts out there where I go, yeah, okay, that's fairly reasonable, right? But I completely lose it with him, for example, with the body shaming. But the other stuff was things like putting up representations of Chinese art that show two snakes intertwined and go, the ancient Chinese knew about, the genetic genome. And I go, no, that hang on a minute. It's a bit like, this is getting into the realm of where pyramids are being built by aliens. We know full well that they have not been built by aliens.
Yeah, science fiction.
Ancient astronaut theorist Jordan Peterson now chiming in. Oh my Lord.
Well, it again, I come back to this phenomenon of an emerging almost cult wherein he sits as a guru. Because Rish, you made an interesting observation. He can put things really succinctly. I've listened to him talk with Sam Harris, and like some of the stuff I go, and I'm very well read and versed in philosophy, comparative religions, psychology, and so on. I'm sitting there going, what the hell is he actually talking about? Some of the Jungian stuff that he comes up with is completely misrepresented. It's about as good as the lobster theory and serotonin, which was the whole cherry-picked number. And again, one of the things that, if you're going to have to position yourself as the smartest person in the room, there is something wrong, because I want to come into the room with, the attitude that you talked about, Nathan, earlier on, which one mouth, two ears. I want to just listen. I want to get, what is it people are thinking, how are they thinking about stuff, rather than me going and proselytizing and bringing down the 15 commandments from the Temple Mount.
Right.
You know, it's like, that's what, you know, and I mean, even the title of the books put me on edge, because I went, you know, I spend most of my time clinically coaching parents going, put the rules aside and begin to work with your kids on values, strong humanistic values. That's what you need. I mean, I know as a teenager that anyone told me, to hear the rules, I would sort of spend a fair amount of time going, how can I break this and get away with it? But when it came down to values, are you going to be respectful? Yeah, I am. There was no debate about it.
Yeah.
Why? Because I saw that as the way to be for me. That gave me a sense of meaning, but it also extended to having a sense of purpose. And this is where I see lots of men in our culture today as completely missing that really strong sense of purpose and meaning, because we've been focusing on task, not being, in a way that has become destructive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts, Mo?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he has a book about rules, about how we should act in the world, I mean, that to me is such a godlike complex, right? He should have called it the 12 Commandments rather than the 10 rules. Because what he's really saying is that he's come up with the rules that we should all live by. And we don't have rules that we live by. As you said, we have, you know, ethics and morals behind what we do. But we're all different, and we all live in very different societies, and we all live with different people, and we all have our own rules and our own ethics and our own understanding of how to actually work with people. To have this idea that there's a certain number of rules or a certain, you know, number of commandments that we have to actually live by, that he's come up with, is really, yeah, some sort of godlike complex, it sounds like to me. Which is insane. And the fact that it's actually popular is even more insane.
That's dangerous, yeah.
It's really dangerous, right? It's really dangerous to turn around and say, these are the 10 rules you got to live by. And then if anything falls out of that, it's free for all, right? You can do what you want.
I'll tell you what, if I looked at his stuff when I was 15 or 14 consistently, I feel like I would have been more naive, or actually naive enough to think that he was saying some proper things. Like, I just think that's you're totally right. I think it's just like, you can tell just even from the littlest things, just from the title of his book, like it's his way or the highway sort of vibe. And if you're not, he's got enough followers and enough following to where you can get shut out like a lot from society. I think that's where Jordan's getting at to this point, where he's gonna be that figure where hopefully a majority of people will follow him. But if it gets to that point, then eventually your thought against his is just, and I don't think that should be it. I think that's like every time I see an interview with Jordan, he looks like hell. Like he looks like he hadn't slept in days. Like he looks like he's gonna tear you a new one. Like you just got into the principal's office sort of vibing and just get taught this whole new thing on how to A, B, C, boom. This is how you do it. And if you steer off it,
very, yeah, it's authoritarian.
Yeah, is that someone you want to really follow? I mean, it just makes me. A, is it someone you want to follow that looks like that? Obviously, he's very stressed about life, but you know, B,
it seems like he enjoys himself talking.
Right, but I think that maybe that branches into, well, who are the people that this resonates with, right?
Yes,
and people who are missing the direction, that implicit direction in their own lives, in their own self, in their own consciousness, who don't have a set of values that make sense to them, either because they were never taught one, or they just evaded them, right? And then when you have someone come in and say, this is the way that you live, someone who's successful, right? Someone who people listen to, a platform, come in and say, this is how you live life, and this is how you live life well. Well, then it becomes pretty easy to see how someone would fall into that trap.
Very good point.
So,
oh my God.
the thing is that with self-proclaimed gods, people who are looking for a direction are looking for a direction which is simple to follow. And the statements that he puts in, like, I have few statements: you are not everything you could be, and you know it. Like, everyone wants to be more than what they are. Obviously, that's so basic. But below that, he puts in a lot of shit, which is his opinions And people think because he said this simple thing, which if you think like, and people have been saying that for a long time, that what you do is every day you put your best foot forward, and that's how you, and that's not something which is unique that he says. But the thing is that people who are looking for direction see this successful man who says that this 11 rules help me become successful, and you could be successful by just following this 11 rules, which are really basic, like your father would teach you because he has that's years of experience. But no one wants to listen to the father, and they are just looking for a way how to live life. So that's how he
Such a
gets
good
followed.
point. Because our generation's like fall into that. Because I will kid you not, every time I go on Instagram, there's another dude that's trying to sell me a marketing technique that will make me 10 grand. Or you follow these 10 things.
How to think like a billionaire.
Yeah, how to think, and that's exactly, there's multiple versions of Jordan Peterson being branched out and convincing people that they're doing like a good thing to society. And unfortunately, kids like me and younger are going to think, wow, I actually honestly thought Tai Lopez was like, yeah, if I do this and that, I'll do it. And like, just straight up, even my stepdad, out of all things, pointed out his BS. And I'm like, dude, even this guy, like even the other gurus, like that's what, like you said, like people that need that, like, get, or, you know, there's a saying that, oh, she fills gaps, he fills gaps. Like, it's like, that fills gaps for people, and that's dangerous, because if that's what people are relying on, especially with men, and then there's a whole epidemic with us, and this whole sort of spiel on finding who we are, what we want to do, and how we react properly within societal norms and values. That can't be convinced that's right, because then more and more people do it, the other people are going to be thinking that's right.
Yeah.
And that's that, like, instantly, the guru is, I think, like a billionaire, Jordan's 12 ways on how to be super cool like him, or sort of things like that. Like, I just think that it's so dangerous. Like, it's for us, especially because there's a lot of people right now trying to find purpose. Like, everyone's on Instagram, seeing people live these lives, fake or real. It still makes the question probably twice, 4 times, if not more, this generation, if not beforehand, because they're seeing what other people are doing, and they're convinced that it's right. And it's all jaded because of that. And Jordan's a big example of that. And it branches up to all those people on Instagram that want to train you to the billionaire mindset, the alpha mindset, the workout plan mindset, the gym freak, this part. Like, that's just really dangerous. And it's the whole thing.
And the more people listen to Jordan, he thinks that he's putting out truth. He thinks that, okay, I am important, and then he puts out more blabber. And it's a whole cycle, because the more media attention he gets, the more he puts out. He knows how he gets media attention,
and that's
the
like
more
one of the prime
things
examples, dude. You're so spot on with that. I see it all the time on Instagram, and people get convinced, and then people get follower counts, they get their blue check mark, they get their spotlight on TV, and then it's over. Now people are convinced, and there's so much power. And it's good that you said like the whole religious aspect too with it, because Jordan's kind of like try to be a preacher, having his Jordanisms almost. Like, it's like he's made his own ism, and that's just like, come on, man. Like, the pedestal.
Same with I think like same with Elon Musk, or anyone who gets a lot of power or a lot of attention. He then starts, without thinking, putting out things which he thinks would get more attention and more people, because they have already followed him. They don't want to change their opinion, because people might think, oh, he was stupid that he was following this guy. But even if he feels like the guy might be wrong, he won't change his opinion, because he already has put his mind out that, okay, I am a big follower of this guy. And even if he's changing roads, he thinks, no, he will come back on this road.
Right.
So like, with more power corrupts everyone.
Yeah, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yep.
I mean, this is
so.
Sorry, sorry.
No, go for it. I think you're about to pick up with something that I wanted to bring in. Go on.
So I see this as a really sad indictment of society at the moment, that so many people are looking for someone to follow, that they don't have people in their own lives that they can actually use as mentors, that they can use as people to support their own values. You know, what you're saying is that there's millions of people out there who are just willing to blindly follow anybody who they don't actually know, right? We don't know these people for anything else, right? But we're willing to follow them because we don't have people in our own lives. And I think that's a really sad thing, right? there was a study done 15 years ago where they asked teenagers how many people in their lives do they have that they can rely on outside their own families. And the average was, I think, 9 or 10 people that teenagers thought they had who they could rely on outside their family if they had a major crisis. They did that again about 2 years ago and asked the same question at the teenagers, and they said zero people outside of their family that they felt as though they could rely on as a mentor, as somebody who would actually support them. Now, that's really sad. And I think that's why a lot of people are turning to these gurus on social media and on these platforms, because we don't have society anymore where we're connected, where, you know, older generations are actually mentoring younger generations, where people are actually involved in groups and so on, where they feel as though there's someone outside of their tiny little bubble that they can actually rely on and get information from. And that's where we learn, you know, that's where we learn how to actually interact with each other, what our morals are, what our values are, and so on. And if we don't have that through other means, then we're going to get it through the internet, and that's really scary.
Yeah.
And that's also the very thing that makes us, as young men, susceptible to be radicalized. Doesn't matter whether it's something like fundamentalist religion, gun culture, pickup artists, you name it. It suddenly becomes this, you know, contact zone that exploits that vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of men.
That's true.
It's crazy. But all these gurus, it's mostly guys. And it's guys that have a lot of these problems too. And it's just like, I think it's also a good opportunity to highlight that we're in trouble here. There's a lot of men that are just eagerly to follow this jump the gun sort of thing to get someone in that life that they haven't had, or whatever may be the situation. I mean, personally for me, I had to go through multiple, you know, therapists and institutions, and to even block off family members to get the proper help I needed, you know, mentally, to get that confidence that I needed, you know. And I think it's just like people are going really fast on finding a solution. I think that's just the problem, because we have an issue like, well, if we find a quick, you know, solution to it, boom, it should be okay. And if other people were doing it, but internet's just like, I think we can really use it for good. It's just, it's been used so badly, and it's mostly male dominant in sort of these like facets that are hyper scammers or hyper gurus, you know, just all not encompassing. It sucks that most, like, I don't see too many females going out there professing that they have a billionaire mindset. They just do it. And then if people like it, then okay, well, I could mentor you, sit you down. Like, it's really hard for men to get that proper help.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, like that's just, I see that often.
You know, in terms of, like Mark was saying, not having mentors in our lives, or not having direction, not having, you know, I think what people like Peterson capitalize on, and what a politician like Trump capitalizes on, what Ben Shapiro capitalizes on, right, is this narrative that they can kind of dig up fairly easily, which is, you know, I was like you. I had no direction. I had no wealth. I had nothing powerful in my life. And then I started living like this. I started blaming these people. I started realizing that this wasn't my fault, but it was these conditions, these set of conditions, which we have the power to change, right? And it's that story which appeals to particularly men who lack all those things personally. And someone like Peterson sells them a story, right? You should buy into my perspective because it'll get you these things.
But then the really sad thing is they're in that situation often because they didn't have a father figure who mentored them, or any other males in their lives to mentor them. And then they're being sold this way of getting out of it to act exactly the same as those men who were in their lives, right, that treated them badly, and they didn't actually have mentors because of that. So we're spiraling down because there's men out there who didn't have father figures and didn't have men in their lives who acted as good mentors. So they're listening to men who are telling them to be like those mentors that didn't exist, which means that they're going to do the same, make the same mistakes. And
I think this is exactly what Gunter was saying earlier, right? About generation after generation of men convincing each other to live life this way because this is the way that it's going to be successful, when in reality it's just the
it's lonely and pathetic.
Yeah, exactly. It's because I don't know.
Very lonely and very
how to perpetuate the greatest con in human history. That's what it is. So, one of my favorite podcasts at the moment is by a guy called Nick Hanauer. He's one of the 1%. It's called Pitchfork Economics. I have a great interest in, economics from a story point of view, as I hinted earlier on with neoliberal economics. And one of the things that they do in each podcast with their guests is they ask them a question. The final question is, so if you were the world dictator for one day, what would you do? And I think that's probably a really good place at the moment to think about. So if you could do anything, right, king of the world, what would you do? Grayson's smiling. I think he's in a autocrat.
That's such a good one. The first thing that comes to mind is planting a tree in LA every block and have it as a forest. That's the nature epitome. But man, I don't know. I do. That's like a hard one, Grayson. I'm stuck. Oh my god.
Well, I love the thing of the trees, right? Because I've been a number of times to LA, and one of the things that's really missing in LA is lots of trees.
Right. That's why I say that.
Yeah. But it's also representative. And as much as I give Jordan Peterson a hard time about his Jungian psychology, there are symbols in our society, in our culture, that have gone and are particularly meaningful. And the whole notion of the tree is really important. I mean, how do we perpetuate a healthy forest? Because at the moment the fucker is dying, And so I like that. But remember the other point that I was making earlier on, which is you guys are fundamentally the guys who are going to be working on the next level of the legacy, whether you like it. Rish, movie making. Grayson, you, storytelling, movie making, music, right? I mean, when I was a teenager, young adult, I mean, I played percussion in a Carlos Santana, cover band. So for me, the whole Latino, it was just like infused, and it's still some of my favorite music. And I loved seeing it evolve to different levels. Yeah. The point where I go, hip hop, not so much,
Right.
But it's the stories that come through both in music and in art, in filmmaking, novel telling, and so on, that I think are going to have a great influence. But we also need to come at this at an intellectual level, where we reach into the academic scientific knowledge and go, look, this stuff is bullshit and this stuff is real. And I think that all of us in our own way need to find a way, I think, in contributing it. So, Grayson, you're up.
Okay. I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna ask you to reserve your judgment for me until after I've explained it. Okay.
No problem.
So I think if I could do anything that I wanted to, as king of the world, you said,
yeah,
I'd throw a party on the beach. Because it seems like such a what could I possibly do in a day, right? That would change the entire trajectory of human civilization in a way that would really fundamentally change us all for the better, right? And like, to me, that's never been how this works, right? To me, this has always been like, we have to, like, as long as it's taken to get here, it's going to take the same amount of time to get out of here, right? And I think a lot of that just begins with, like, people learning how to be, right? Learning how to be with one another and to have fun, and what it feels like to have happiness and to have a good life, and what kind of communities we can build that have those values, right? And I could say, oh, we're gonna totally end capitalism, we're gonna totally end consumerism, we're gonna take all the resources in the world, we're gonna evenly distribute them to every person. But I don't think you could do that in a day.
No, you can't. But I like the beach party thing.
Doesn't that sound fun?
Yeah, let's do it. It's summertime. Let's do it.
And it's in Mark's
West Side,
in Mark's words, it's all about contact. It's about human contact. And when you were talking about that, I thought, well, that's a really good point, because ultimately we don't need massive action right now. Small actions will have an amplifying action across time. We know that. It's out of physics, right? The whole bit. Instilling a new habit means just doing one little bit different each day, and eventually a whole day is different.
The title of your book is not 18 rules to live by, whatever, Gordon Peterson. It's making good men great, surfing the new wave of masculinity. So
yeah,
you're talking to a surfer.
Yeah, we can go surfing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's go surfing.
Yeah, we're all surfing. Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm talking there.
Yeah. All right.
Trees too.
I don't know. What would you do? I want to hear what your answers are.
I'm already doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. It took me a while to get, in a sense, the sort of, this is my bit of narcissism. It took me a while to get to that point where I could actually say that. Because I just went, man, you're just as bad. You're just having yourself on. But the reality is, over my almost 40 years of working as a therapist, I know that I've changed individuals' lives, I've changed family lives. And I've got young boys coming in, in the last 5 years, 5 of my, clients, young clients who I worked with from 15 to 18, have become psychologists.
Mm.
And, they work in a similar framework to me, and they want to see similar things happen. So in that sense, as Grayson, as you put it, I can't, single-handedly in one day change the economic system or the inequality. But, it's like planting one seed after another as we create the beginnings of a forest. When we plant forests, we don't plant for tomorrow, we plant for generations to come.
Right.
And I think that's it.
Yeah. Mark?
I would put proper international regulations over all of the internet and all technology companies, so that they have to act socially responsible, and we wouldn't get these sort of rises. So they would have to get rid of all the likes and the comments and all the rest of it. They would have to have proper regulations around bullying and monitoring false information and research on, making sure that what's content that's on there is appropriate, and that they don't have, internet porn being streamed to kids and all of those things. So yeah, I would have a big document which would just regulate all of the internet companies and all of the technology companies, so that they actually have to act socially responsible, which they don't do currently.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And I think the tangibles are absolutely, as much as maybe Gunter and I might be kind of like philosophizing about, whatever. right? I think the tangibles are very, very important, right? Like, the reality is that if you can make change in a day, you should, right? What can you do as an individual? What change can you make that will actually create those positive, far-reaching waves?
There's so much that we could change about the internet and the social media companies and all the rest of it that's on technology, that's biasing the way we perceive the world and the way people are acting in the world, that I find it disgusting that the governments aren't doing more to regulate these companies. And they're making billions of dollars and not doing anything about the negative consequences of their actions. And I find that really offensive. We've now got kids who, suicides through the roof, depression's through the roof, anxiety's through the roof. And it's the next generation who are going to be really affected by that. We need to get out. We need to actually socialize face to face with people, actually have friends, have relationships, have mentors, and those things are really important.
That's a good quote. Actually have friends, more not just Facebook friends. Yeah, no, I get that's so good though, because I would see kids act the way like how we did. Like they don't really go out, knock on the neighbor's door, and tell them if you want to come over and play soccer. It's very glued to internet and screen time. I think it's just a generation thing. But that's such a good point. Actual friends out there that talk to you. That's a good one.
It's the condition.
If you're depressed, you're not going to get the answers on Facebook. You're going to get the answers by actually sitting down with someone and having a chat. And seeing that they've got shit life too, and it's okay, and we can get through this together. It's not about seeing another Kardashian ass being shown to you, or whatever it happens to be. So we need to open up. We need to start chatting to people, spending more time face to face, touching each other. So important. All the neurotransmitters that are released when you actually touch someone. Same neurotransmitters as when you have an orgasm. And that's why we all have ways of greeting each other, is because we touch. We shake hands in the more stoic countries. We kiss each other on the cheeks in the more, advanced countries. Even Inuits, right? They rub noses because it's the only part of their body that's actually showing, because we have C fibers on our hairy skin, and the C fibers are only there for touch, and they activate all these really good neurotransmitters in our brain to make us feel good and make us feel connected and make us feel open with the person that we're actually there with. And we don't get any of that when we're doing this sort of stuff, unfortunately. Well, you guys do, because you're in the same room and you can do that. But it's so sad that we don't have any, as much of that anymore, and we're missing out on such good stuff in our brains. Which is really sad.
That's why everybody kind of went hog wild when we got put in lockdown for so long. COVID kind of killed all the human connection, and it was good to have this, but just getting together, even the social distance stuff, we can't just rely on social media. Social media is going to be the death of us.
This question might be going down this rabbit hole, okay? But okay. So I heard in a class that when you watch a video of someone getting their thumb squished by a hammer, right? The same neurotransmitters that go off in their brain when their thumb gets hit by the hammer go off in your brain also. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So if I watch a video of two people hugging, do I get those same neurotransmissions?
You get some of them. So there's what we call mirror neuron system, which is that activation, which is what's causing that activation. That is when you see someone do something, your mirror neuron system activates. So it activates the same neurons as if you were doing it, but much slighter amount. So it's just below what would actually activate the muscles. So it's activated, but below what would activate the muscles. So it's not as extreme a response as if you actually did it yourself. So you would get some of them, but not all of them. And also you don't get the C fibers activated, which are activated when you actually get touched, because
Right.
they're based on them touching your hairy skin, which is everywhere except for your palms and your hands and your feet, but them touching that area and that activating another area of your brain, which then activates those neurotransmitters. So you don't get the serotonin and stuff, which is really important when you do that, but you do get the dopamine. So it's sort of like going to McDonald's and having McDonald's meal rather than having a full, healthy meal. You get a little hit, but it's not actually as good as having a nice salad and all of the nice veggies and all the rest of it that you should be eating.
All right.
That makes
sense to me. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
No worries. I can go on about that stuff for hours.
So, the conversation's going well. We were actually looking at the time, we were actually doing pretty well. We did, Rish had to step out there. I think there was an electricity issue where he's at. That's why he had to phase out. But anyway, just to kind of, let's kind of do a wrap up and within about 10 minutes and because the conversation's well, we may have to do another one. How
sad.
Yeah, well, I'm always trying to push for more special episode shows. It's just a matter of timing. But yeah, this is going quite well. I like I said, putting everybody into a room and having a good conversation and just that's what this is, getting the different opinions across, whether you're on the same page or you might have a disagreement or whatnot. We want to, it's definitely, so I think we need to go on to a part 2, and it can be a little less, let's leave Peterson at home. But we, there's so much to additionally talk about. Like I said, as Gunter, you brought out going through, we're now in our 4th season. So there's so much, and this is our first guest episode. So I definitely want to schedule another one as well. But so let's go ahead and just kind of go around and let's do some final thoughts so we can kind of start tallying this up for the night. But
Grayson?
I'll go quick. I think when we started this, there were a lot of thoughts flying around. And I think we kind of towards the end got to a place that really opened up the conversation for me and allowed me to kind of understand it more deeply. And I hope other people had the same experience. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. Honestly, I'd love to continue this conversation on recorded or not on a later date. So yeah.
Thanks, Grayson.
I thought it was great having another, guy on my side too, youngin right here, because I think it's good to have same age groups for sure, kind of like have the same point of view, but both different sort of like understandings of what we go through, because we live in a weird age, especially these 20-year-olds right now, 18. We're in oh my God. I don't think we're even anymore in an informational age. I think it should be called something else. I don't know, but I think overall you had a good point. I think we really honed in for sure on that specific topic at the end. I really loved it. I think my favorite point, or actually just honestly, from this whole thing, one thing I could really draw in from this is that, just be careful who you really trust and listen to. Honestly, I think we just have to be more viable, and it's not just because it'll hurt us physically or mentally. That's just the way to go about things. Just check your source, check who you're listening to, and if it comes easy, probably not that great. But I think that's the best thing I can honestly draw from this, is just that young people really need to smarten up. Absolutely. And it's not a fault of our part. There's so many elements, but I think in general, we need to definitely think a little bit more out of the box, honestly. And the simple terms, honestly, just think of it a little bit differently than what we've been kind of told. That's honestly my wrap up right there. I think it was really great. An honor, Mark and Gunter. Really great to meet you through Zoom and talk, definitely.
Any final words, Mark?
Yeah, I found it fantastic. It was great to see there's some great young men who are obviously on the right track and are really thinking about these issues, which is beautiful for me to see, which is awesome. And I thank you all for inviting me along. It was great. And thank you for being involved, everyone.
You're welcome. Yeah, ditto. I mean, Mark put it very succinctly. Thanks to you guys. As I said, this is an ongoing process. This is an ongoing conversation, whether it's in our forum here or whether it's going to be elsewhere with others. I mean, you guys are very thoughtful. You've obviously devoted some time to, taking a look at what's going on, and I think that's something that needs to be shared. Particularly in this current sort of time in history, where we really need to do that. So I'm actually looking forward to doing like part 2.
Mhm.
Yeah. Definitely, that's on the books. And just in words of Rish, since he had to jump out because of some electrical issues, I think he lost battery power, and so he said he really enjoyed the conversation and a chance to talk with you again, and looking forward to another session as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Miranda.
All right. Hey, that's a wrap, everybody, for Inspired Change with Gunter. Thank you for listening, and always keep inspiring change.
Rock on!
You're from surfing? No, I'm just kidding.
No, I need lunch.
Oh, yeah. That's true. It's noontime. You didn't grab
on the
anything.
balcony.
I think I lost 2 pounds in this room. This jumpsuit's making me like a sauna. I swear. I'm like right here on a work, and this whole thing is 80s denim.
You and I are the only ones in like long sleeves. Well, I think Mark is in long sleeves. I don't know how the weather is over there.
It's beautiful. I'm about to go surfing. Guys. It's 3 foot today, so I'm off for a surf now.
Oh, you're going to? I'm so jealous.
Wonderful.
I'm going surfing right away, straight after this.
I'm about to have lunch.
Yeah. You just recuperated. You feeling better, Gunter? Bye.
Take care.
Hey guys, nice to meet you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda at noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at noirtainment.com.